the FreeManCast.
Welcome to another edition of the FreeManCast. I am Josh Friedman. It has been a while since I've recorded one of these, but why not give it another go? I'm joined by Brent Sanders, who I believe is a return guest. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Brent is born in the United States of America, but he's world traveled and now been living in Bulgaria for how many years?
Too long.
Too long to remember?
5 years.
A quarter century
Full quarter century.
of your life has been spent
Feels like a silver anniversary.
in the Republic of Bulgaria.
Cheers, Josh.
Na zdravie.
Yes, and I've been lucky enough to travel around with Josh a little bit, and we went down to Idomeni 2 weeks ago.
Yes, we're going to be talking about refugees on this edition of the podcast. That's because we recently took a trip to the now infamous refugee camp at the Greek-Macedonian border outside the town of Idomeni. And we were joined by a third man. Unfortunately, he's missing from the podcast, but we might offer a little bit of his perspective as well. But first off, I'd like to hear from you, Brent. What was your take on what you saw down in Idomeni, Greece?
Well, I took away one main lesson, and that was that people do not value what they're given freely.
Explain.
Well, you could see yourself when we were at the camp. I mean, there were food containers half-eaten or uneaten, thrown on the ground, trampled on, next to scarves and sweaters and grandmothers' belongings that had been given to these people. And I guess, when they see a better sweater or something, they just throw the previous one away, and maybe somebody comes along and picks it up, maybe somebody doesn't. But I suspect that the whole trail from where they landed in Greece, whether it was on an island or that the whole trail to Idomeni is full of thrown away gifts from caring people.
Yes, for months on the various refugee trails in the Balkans, I have seen gifts been bestowed upon asylum seekers, and I've also seen a lot of stuff thrown on the ground. Not just trash, not just empty food cartons, not just empty bags of chips, but we've seen everything from sleeping bags to tents to what all did you see down there?
Well, I thought it was very interesting where we did find some brand new tents, by the way. One of them had been unused.
Speaking of which, what are you wearing right now, Brent?
And I'm wearing a nice little, I don't know what you would call this, a windbreaker. Windbreaker. Yeah, it's like brand new. It's like in perfect condition. And it was just thrown alongside the road next to, I might add, soap, brand new soap.
Mm-hmm.
Toothpaste, brand new containers, medicine, some of which had been used. It's like high blood pressure medicine, I checked. What else? Toothbrushes. There was a brand new toothbrush hanging from a twig in the forest that had just been put there by the refugees. Oh, there were tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of blankets, which I guess were given by the UN. But those blankets are everywhere, scattered throughout the forest. Obviously, people had been living there, but months ago. And just abandoned, everything that you can imagine was abandoned. Backpacks, jackets, very nice sweaters. I mean, I saw things that were obviously like some grandmother, some Greek grandmother, had cherished this sweater. It's a beautiful sweater, for a grandmother, exact, and very finely embroidered, etc. And it was just laid out there next to everything else. Anything you can imagine, basically.
It's a unique take.
No condoms, though.
No condoms? They prefer not to use them? Or
I
is
don't know. I
that's
guess
the
they're not
topic of
given
another
condoms.
discussion?
I suppose that they're not given them.
It's a unique take on the refugee crisis, and specifically Idomeni. Idomeni has been referred to as Dachau. It's been referred to as the end of European values. Almost all of the press coverage is about how the people there are suffering. And there's certainly been times in the winter where it's been rough for them. There's been some snow and a lot of rain and freezing temperatures back, I guess, a couple months ago. But if you walk around the camp, you see that people are fed. They're fed multiple meals during the day. Some of the food is thrown on the ground. I have both photo and video footage of that. And there are tents thrown in the little lake over there. There are tents thrown on the side of the road. There's sleeping bags thrown all over the place. I've seen refugees dumping trash there and elsewhere in the Balkans, and the trash has been piling up over the months. But
might I add that those tents and those sleeping bags and those jackets, like I do want to stress this, that they were like brand new.
Yeah, that was the
and expensive brands.
That was the biggest takeaway for you and this third man, a Bulgarian man, who joined us, and I would say for good reason. It's a little shocking if you come there with the impression that you're going to see people who are starving, people who are suffering, yet at the same time those people are throwing...
They're contemptuous in some cases. I mean, it's just like outright contempt. It's like, how dare you give me this food? I mean, I don't like it. So I'll just throw it away.
There have been cases of that, of refugees refusing to take food and throwing it, or refusing to take water and throwing it. But I think the point that you raised about people not valuing what they get for free, I think is a very valid point.
I don't think all of the refugees, I don't think all of them are actually needless. I think some of them actually are fleeing war and other horrible situations. And I think you've interviewed some people who have proven that they have qualities that would allow them to be integrated into European society. So I don't think it's all of these people. But I think that even the most deserving of, let's say, getting true immigrant status in Europe, they feel the same way about what they're given. Because as soon as they come across something else which is a little bit better, they just take off what they had and they just leave it behind. Or, I don't know, in the case right outside the camp, how many sleeping bags were there alongside the road?
So why don't you explain what you were doing with the third man who joined us? You went on a little bit of a drive on your own when I was interviewing refugees.
Yeah, after we got to the camp, I mean, I felt, first of all, my main unfortunate association was with gypsy camps, because you see the same trash, and it was like trash in the ponds and etc. etc. It was kind of a disgusting place, and I think that you saw more evidence of that in the showers perhaps than I did.
Yeah, I do have
but
photo of feces in the shower.
Very attractive. And so anyway, I just didn't feel like I wanted to hang out there for 3 or 4 hours. And so me and my friend Pepe, we went... First we tried to cross the border. That was unsuccessful because...
Which border?
The Macedonian border, because they required something like a €50 fee for insurance. We just wanted to go there to eat lunch and come back. But...
you could go there by foot.
Maybe that's an interesting
I have done
point.
that. I've
But
walked.
then how much was the taxi?
I've walked back and forth across that border.
How much
about
was the
4 or
taxi?
5 times, and the taxi on the Macedonian side is about €5 into town.
Much cheaper than €100. I mean, than 100 lev or €50. That's a good idea. We should have done that. First of all, we were trapped there because Actually, it was Sunday, so I should have put two and two together ahead of time, and I should have exchanged leva for euros before we crossed the border, because everything there in Greece, basically on Sunday, they're fairly religious people. They don't have any. They do have like restaurants and cafes are open, but no banks and no exchange bureaus. So if you don't have a card, which I don't, then you can't get any. You can't. There's no way you can get euros. So then we were like, okay, fuck, we can't eat, we can't buy something to drink, we can't do this, we can't do that. So we just went up to the mountains, just outside of the camp. There was a place where we could actually pull off the main road that leads to the border, and we just pulled off there and drove up past like an abandoned building that was being used by the refugees. And there were also, I think, some aid workers there when we first arrived. We just drove around them and kept on going up. And we hung out there for a while. We saw a few refugees, said hello to us and passed. And then on the way back, they waited and asked for a cigarette. And they explained that they were Pakistan. One of them spoke English. So, but then after that, we kept on going up that path. I guess they didn't go that far because they were asking for cigarettes, but Pepe found cigarettes at the same place where we found all this other stuff, the medicine and everything else that I'm telling you about. So it was just there. It was in a backpack.
Did you smoke them?
Actually, it was in a jacket, a very nice, heavy jacket, winter jacket, perfect for Pepe. No, I didn't smoke them. Pepe did.
He did?
Yeah. They were in a pack. It was just a regular, like, Winston or something.
And what else did he acquire?
Well, he took 4 sleeping bags.
On the way out, when we were driving out of Idomeni, when I was in the car with you guys, he would drive about 100 meters, then stop the car, grab a sleeping bag, get back in, drive another 100 meters, stop the car, pick up a tent or another sleeping bag.
And that was how far from the camp?
That was not very far. It's actually walking distance.
That's like 10 minutes from the camp walking. So it's like right on, very close, right next to the camp. So they were just abandoning everything because they saw these brand new tents, that had already been set up for them, etc., etc. And I guess they just threw everything, on the way there.
Well, I don't know why, because some of them are...
I don't understand the logic.
Some of them are in large tents that you'd expect to see in a refugee camp, but a lot of them are just in your typical camping tent.
Yeah, expensive camping tents. I actually spent some time last Bulgarian summer there, in one of those tents and I had to pay for it. But that's a different story. Anyway, nice tent.
I briefly joined a couple of the refugees inside their tent. I wasn't checking out the tent, though. I was conducting interviews and getting some documents and some photos, which came in handy. It was actually... You might have heard, if you take a look at my YouTube channel, that this one video I shot with a refugee from Afghanistan has become quite popular in Lithuania. It's an interesting story. The guy was a Lithuanian interpreter who was working with the NATO Lithuanian forces in Afghanistan. Yes. And since then, I
saw that interview.
He's run afoul of the Taliban, and he became a refugee. And he seems to have some convincing evidence that's the case, and I've published some of those documents. And now he's all over Lithuanian television, and it appears that the Lithuanian government is going to bring him in. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, congratulations on that lead.
Thank you. But he's a very unique case. Most people do not have something that is so compelling to offer a country that would make them go to that length to bring them in.
The fact that very, very few of them, in my limited experience, very few of them speak English or some other European language. So I mean, that's a huge problem with integration, first of all, the language, right? And probably, if you think about it, anybody who does succeed to immigrate into Germany or Sweden or Norway or Denmark or wherever those are the places that they want to go to, Austria usually. The rich places, the socialist countries in many cases, that have
They have
big handouts.
they have welfare states. They're
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
socialist, but they have
Which
large
which
welfare
links into
states.
what we were saying earlier, right? Because when people are given things, they don't really value it. They don't appreciate it. So that they're going to get welfare, they're going to get housing benefits, etc., etc. And what are they going to really appreciate it?
That would be interesting to examine. It'd be interesting. I know it's in. It's not covered very much in the media, but it's out there that there are lots of refugees, people have been granted asylum in Germany and other countries who have been given apartments by the government. So it'd be interesting to see how they treat those apartments. Is it
Yes.
similar to the way people treat their housing at the refugee camps? I don't know.
Well, even if they just treat their houses in the same way that they treated their houses where they were from, that would be interesting because you'd have probably fires in the middle of the kitchen and stuff like that. I mean, but how do you? Okay, well, that's a huge question about the integration. How do you integrate people into a society, or I don't think that they will. I think that if they ever get out of out of the tents or whatever in the camps that they have in different countries, they're gonna move in with friends and family or people from their own country, and they're not gonna learn English, they're not gonna learn Swedish or German or whatever. They're not gonna integrate. I don't see that happening. Do you? Very, very
I
few of
see
them.
lots of issues with integration, but I've come across more English speakers than you have. It's not to say that most people coming speak good English. Usually, I find in every group of, say, five, at least one who is the English speaker of the group. Usually, he struggles with English, but I would guess that a lot of the young ones in particular are going to pick up English. Are they going to pick up the language in whichever country they're settling in? I don't know. Are they?
Okay, let's say that they do because they're going to have state schooling probably.
There is some state schooling, but they're if they arrive and say they're 25 years old, they're not going to go K through 12. They're going to get some crash course in the language and in the culture, and it's really
Yeah,
up to
like
them.
it's inappropriate to touch women without their
Yes,
without their
those
express approval.
because of the sexual assault issue, which is taboo for a lot of people to talk about, but
That is
the
huge.
sexual assault issue became such a big deal, and this actually dates back several years. The New York Times covered it. It really started in Norway, where there was a sex ed program for migrants, mostly Middle Eastern migrants. But back then, because it was 4 or 5 years ago, they weren't referred to as refugees. But there was a bit of a sexual assault epidemic, and I believe it was Norway that was the first country to adopt it, and then others have followed suit. And now a lot of the refugees who are arriving have mandatory sex ed classes, which basically teach you not to rape.
Raping is wrong. It's also wrong to touch people. Well, actually, it's interesting because I think that something else that could be looked into. Remember this Cologne sex attack or whatever it was dubbed in the media at New Year's? It's interesting under German law, just groping a woman is considered rape. So I wonder how many of those rape cases were just groping, or how many of them were actually penetration style.
Or really, grape? I mean, grope is rape in Germany.
Under the law, it's considered rape.
Grope.
Well, you grope a woman without their, without their express approval, then yes. it's considered rape under German law, as far as I understand.
Well, I'll have to look that up. But wow. If that's the case, then
It's like saying statutory rape.
then
I
on
mean,
New
it's a
Year's
law.
Eve there happen to be a lot of rape cases. If that's really the law, wow.
Were you there?
No, but there's been plenty of video, and there've been some of the victims appeared on television.
So, I mean, if under the law, I'm speculating because this is what I heard, is what I read somewhere. But if under the law, groping a woman is considered an act of rape, and they say 10,000 rapes occurred, how many of those were gropings? I mean, 10,000 is a huge number. Let's say 1,000.
I believe it was in the hundreds in Cologne alone, but there were also cases in other cities, which is very high
compared to previous statistics.
Sweden's been dubbed the rape capital of the West, and if you look at the UN statistics, I've gone through them. If you go back a few years, they haven't published more recent ones, but yes, Sweden did get to the very top of the UN statistics. A lot of countries don't report rapes to the UN, but European countries do. And Sweden's an interesting case because Sweden has had an open door policy to immigrants going back at least a few decades.
Yeah, but what are the numbers?
It's something per 1,000 or 10,000. I don't remember what it is exactly. I don't have it in front of me. Like something like 60 per.
The trends. What are the trends? I mean, was it recently dubbed that?
Yeah,
Did
it was
have
recently,
the same
but
amount of violence 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
The trend was increasing over a decade, say between 2003 and 2012, something like that. There was a big increase. And if you go back even a couple decades back before that, there's an even bigger increase.
So you're saying it's like this kind of a long slope?
Well, the viewers can't see, but
Of course.
and I need to check it, and I could post it online. It's the stats are out there. Sweden has had
I wonder
a
if
large
it's an
increase.
upward trend or a steady trend or a decreasing trend. That's what I mean.
It's an increasing trend.
Okay.
And there are a lot of factors that go into that, and
It would be interesting
depending
to see
on
if
your
there's a spike since there has been the influx of immigrants over the last 2 years, let's say.
well, the thing about Sweden is that it's debatable when that influx of immigrants occurred.
Okay. But you should be able to see that in the numbers because they should be able to say how many immigrants they took in last year compared to
Yeah, but the
2010.
rape stats aren't out yet for that. But Sweden's been taking in a lot of immigrants going back years. And there's a lot that can be made of that. Like what you were saying about liberal. Would that be liberal or conservative rape laws in Germany? Regardless.
You mean liberal as in classical liberal or
All right,
as in Western, like American liberal?
Okay, if
to me it sounds Western
if mere
liberal.
grope can be considered rape, then that has a huge effect on rape statistics. And I don't know what it is in Sweden, but there's certainly a feminist culture in Sweden, and some people have argued that's why the rape stats are so high.
Okay.
And there are plenty of counter arguments to that too.
Sure. Shall we go into them or?
No, I think we should get into Eastern Europe because that's where we are.
Okay.
And I think it would be interesting for listeners to get a little bit of the perspective of what people think about refugees, say, in Bulgaria.
Well, there's probably a wide range of points of view. I mean, you're also going to have the so-called bleeding heart liberals in the American sense of the word liberal, meaning left wing. You're going to have people like that. Of course, there are people like that. There are people here who are giving clothes to the immigrants who are in the camps here outside of Sofia, which we should go visit, by the way. Some weekend. I mean, it's not. It's gonna. There are probably buses there, so we should go. But you're gonna have that. You're gonna have those left wingers, and you're gonna have probably in Eastern Europe, if I have to be honest, and maybe it's not just Eastern Europe because you see the trends in Western Europe as well. But there are a lot of neo-Nazis. I've noticed like memes. If I watch Facebook a lot and I post a lot of memes and I see a lot of memes, and I swear to God there are pro Adolf Hitler, pro Chicho Adi. They call him Chicho Adi.
Chicho Adi?
Yeah, like Uncle Adolf, Uncle Adi.
And that's in Bulgaria.
Yeah, and you see these memes. So there's that very, I don't know if I would call it right wing. I think I would call it fascist tendencies among quite a large swath of the population, if I might say. But then you have, I don't know, I think even like I'm a member of the Libertarian Society, which you know, and you know a lot of the people from that society. I think that, of course, we do not advocate like turning the immigrants into soap or something of that sort. But they are, I think they see that there have been negative effects, and if this goes unchecked, there will continue to be negative effects, and maybe they'll get worse. So I think there is a concern among the general population in Bulgaria that there should be borders, and the migrants should not be allowed uncontrolled access to Europe, basically.
In Bulgaria, I mostly come across very negative sentiments towards the refugees. It's not a country full of Nazis, and
Not full.
And like you said, there are some hippie liberal people here, but it's not the majority. Most people I come across here are not supportive of the refugees coming in. Some will go to such lengths as saying they want to kill the refugees, which may sound extreme, but I think there's a sizable portion of the population who believes that.
Well, I do know one or two people like that. I guess, I don't know, I don't maybe know such a...
I've come across several instances.
I know mostly people who are students, they want to study in Europe, professionals, etc., etc. And I don't get that from most people.
No, I'm not saying it's most people, but it's a portion of the population. And maybe they're not saying I want to kill the refugees, but they might say the refugees are terrorists. They don't belong here. I've heard that when I'm getting my hair cut.
Okay, by
the woman cutting my hair.
Well, there you go. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I guess it would depend. If I hung out with more people from the street, so to speak, then I would probably encounter that a lot more.
Did you hear about this Bulgarian vigilante who's in the news?
Dimko? What's his name?
I forget his name.
Yes, well, he's famous now. Actually, he has quite a lot of support, I think, on Facebook, at least from the Bulgarians. Yeah, he was a guy who would catch immigrants crossing the border illegally.
From Turkey.
Yeah, somewhere, I forget exactly where, but it's somewhere, I think in Stranja or somewhere down there. and he would catch them crossing the border, and they do this a lot. I mean, there are a lot of reports of them being stopped in the woods, and not to mention the police brutality issue, which we can discuss also later. But so he's sort of a vigilante, yeah. So he's out there. He's saying the police are not stopping them. The border patrol is not working. So he would go out there and beat them up, basically, with his bare hands, as far as I know, which is, better than using some sort of tire iron or something. I don't know. Vinkel in Bulgarian. That's for the Bulgarians. But yeah, and then he would just basically drag them in and take them to the police. So then he got arrested. As far as he's arrested.
Oh, he was arrested. I didn't know. He was
arrested, as far as I know.
So he's in jail, or they let him out?
I think he's in jail. If he's not in jail, he's under house arrest. So, but there's a lot of support for him on Facebook.
I would guess there are a lot of people complaining that he's locked up while refugees are running free.
In fact, I think our friend who drove us there to the camp, I think that he said that he wanted to go act like he wanted to do some of these antics, act like Dimko.
Okay, so we're talking about Pepe now?
That's unconfirmed for the moment, but something of perhaps.
Alright, I have an anonymous source telling me Pepe wants to go to the Turkish border and use his bare hands to remove some of these refugees. That's a sentiment in Bulgaria. It's not everyone, but a lot of people do think, or shall I say, feel that way.
Yes, and it's a hangover. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about like the Nazism in Eastern Europe, and it's a huge contradiction in terms, because most of these people, like in Bulgaria, you're either pro-America or you're pro-Russia, and a lot of people I don't like it. I'm sure you don't like it. I don't like the amount of power or pressure that the U.S. puts on foreign countries when they're making their own policies for themselves. I believe in autonomy. And so anyway, I mean, a lot of people, and I can see that, and I can see the good and the bad of American policies and American history, etc., and the good and the bad about Russia. I don't think either of them are perfect, and I don't think either of them are the devil. But most people will idolize the one and demonize the other, right? So either you love America or you hate America. So here in Bulgaria, there are a lot of people who hate America because of the foreign influence that it extends. But the contradiction is that those same people are the ones who, for the last 25 years, since I've been here, they've been saying, all gypsies should be turned into soap. I mean, it's this Hitleristic.
That's a Bulgarian saying.
Yes, it is. Tsigani na supun. And now they're saying it about the immigrants. But the funny thing is, I mean, they're pro-Russia, which is supposed to be, it's like in their minds, it's a symbol of communism. And they're pro-Hitler Nazism, which is National Socialism. I mean, it's socialism too, but at the time, or in the average mind, it means fascism. So fascism and communism are supposed to be opposed, but in Bulgaria, if you don't love America, you're both pro-Nazi and pro-communism.
Which to some are contradicting ideas. Maybe to others, you just view them as different forms of collectivism.
I do.
They're not contradicting ideas. But I want to go back to the point you're saying it's a hangover from the Nazi times. What about the hangover from the Ottoman times? I thought that's what's driving specifically the anti-Muslim sentiment, and a lot of people here have...
Yeah, well, you see, the thing is that when you're a racist or a collectivist, it's easy to turn your attention from one race to another race or from one group. It doesn't have to be a group because obviously Islam is a religion. But it's easy to do that because people don't make those distinctions and they don't, if you just want to hate somebody, give me a new enemy, I'll hate him.
But isn't there a history in this country of the Ottoman Turks coming in and pillaging villages and raping women? And are those thoughts being conjured up right now during the refugee crisis?
They are, of course. There's no way to escape that, which is sort of what I'm saying is that those people who want to externalize the problem, because that's why they hate America too. They externalize. They don't want to take responsibility for themselves. That's Bulgarians. Sorry, guys. I've told you many times. You're going to have to hear it now on, a podcast. So
You're talking specifically to Bulgarians right now.
Yeah.
Excuse me, you're talking directly to Bulgarians.
Yes. But, they like to blame others. They don't like to take responsibilities for themselves. And that is both from the communist times and from the Ottoman. They used to call it, here in Bulgaria, they would call it the slave mentality. And after you've been a slave for so long, you expect things from the government, etc., etc. You expect handouts, etc., etc. And you don't expect to take responsibility for your own actions, and you don't make your own decisions very carefully. But, so there is a huge part of the population here who is like that, of course. But I'll tell you what, and I've already said that I know mostly people who I consider to be fairly well educated and brought up, etc., with good manners, and they're not, most people that I know are not racist, and they're not. But there is a large part of the people who, no, I forgot what I was going to say. What I was going to say is that if you ask most of the people I know, if you ask them, do you know a Turkish person who lives here in Bulgaria? They will say yes. And you ask them, what's your opinion about that person? Is he a good person or a bad person? Most of them will say he's a good person. The people that they know. Not the ones in the government. Everybody hates everybody in the government, right? And for good reason. But, if they just look at DPS and they say, oh, well, he's horrible because he's Turkish, that's that attitude, that's that racism, blaming somebody else also. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, Josh, did I?
I would say so.
Okay. Perhaps you could redirect me.
I actually found some coverage of it in the international press. The BBC did a feature on this guy, I'm forgetting his name, the Vigilante.
Okay.
But yeah, when they were getting into it, they were getting into the history of Ottoman rule in Bulgaria. And I think they were saying that the media here is reviving those images now that there's the refugee crisis. They're conjuring up these sentiments of...
I don't watch the local media.
And neither do I.
No idea.
So we should probably get someone Bulgarian on the podcast who watches the news.
And who speaks good English, of course.
Moving forward, what do you see happening?
Well, I don't know. Can you tell me, when we were in Idomeni, you said that it could be closed any day. Is there any more news on that? I mean, are they Are they sending back the refugees, or are they
They've
not?
started. Okay, so that border between Greece and Macedonia is shut. The refugees have not been crossing it for a few weeks now. There have been 10 to 15,000 people camped out there, but the Greek government has started busing some of the people back down to Athens and to other camps in the country. Thus far, it's been voluntary. My expectation is that there's going to come a point in which they're going to force everyone to get on buses and to head to other camps in Greece.
Okay, now theoretically speaking, you have camps like this in other European countries located further north than Greece, right? So what Serbia, Macedonia, do they have camps like this on their borders also, where there are like fences, the borders have been shut down? I know that they've been shut down in many countries.
Not this, no, this is unique in the sense that it's a makeshift refugee camp. It's an impromptu refugee camp. The camps in the other Balkan countries are refugee camps that were planned out by the government.
And they're not on the borders.
I
Like
believe
the northern borders.
I believe there's one. Well, for instance, in right on the other side of this border in Gevgelia, there's one. It's much smaller though, and it's probably empty by now because it was basically a transport camp. People would stop there and spend a night or two.
And where do they go from there?
Then they would head up to the Serbian border, and there was a camp up there. I did not visit the one
Yeah, so that's
in
my
Serbia.
question. I mean, is there a fence between Macedonia and Serbia where they're trying to go through up through Serbia?
Greece, the Greek-Macedonian border is the only place along this Balkan route where the refugees have been stranded. The ones who made it past the Greek-Macedonian border made it all the way up through the Balkans and into Austria or Germany, wherever they were heading. This spot is where everyone who did not make it got stuck.
So that means it's the highest possibility that there are terrorists, right? Because those who didn't make it, they didn't have documents, they didn't have...
Well, for that matter, some of the Paris attackers already made it through this route.
Okay, so...
In fact, they were at some of these locations right around the same time I was in Belgrade or various spots in the Balkans.
The system works, folks. Trust your government.
When I was at the at this same camp in Idomeni back in December, I met some Moroccans, and they were telling me how they were faking their documents. They were putting I'm not expecting those guys were terrorists, but these guys were saying how we took off the Moroccan flag or whatever sort of nationality indication they have on it and put in Syrian and Iraqi. And they said some of the guys made it through, some of them got stopped.
Well, yeah. Okay, so in answer to your question, what's going to happen? Well, I've been intimating what my response would be, which is, first of all, it's hard to integrate these people. I don't think they want to be integrated in many cases. Most cases, perhaps. They don't respect the people or what they are given for free. Who they're given, who gives it to them, or what they're given. I think it's a huge influx over the last couple of years. I don't think that any of the governments were really prepared for what's happening right now. I think that you're going to continue to see incidents, and if I can also base this off a little bit of videos that I've seen of what's going on up in places like Luton near London, like let's say Christian activists walk through the Muslim neighborhood, and of course English Christian activists walk through the neighborhood, and the Muslims come out and they say, "We are the future. We have children. You don't have children. We are going to, we are the future of England. It is a Muslim country now." And I think that you're going to see more incidents like this and more attitudes like that.
I have seen some of those videos. I would say that most of the people I've come across in my travels through the various refugee camps have not been that Islamist. The vast majority have not been that Islamist. Some probably share those sentiments but haven't been expressing them. And others could become more radicalized when they arrive and they're surrounded by unemployment. It's not quite the dream that they've been looking for. I also think that there's going to be a clash of civilizations, not just between Muslims and Christians or Middle Easterners and Europeans, but between those who are arriving. Many Syrians and Afghans have made it clear to me that Syrians don't like Afghans and that Afghans don't like Syrians. And there's already been...
Nobody likes the Kurds, so...
And the Kurds do have issues with pretty much everyone. There's so much balkanization within the groups who are arriving.
Infighting, so to speak.
Infighting, sure. And some of it's already happened. It's already erupted into physical fighting at Idomeni and elsewhere in Greece. And there have been increasing reports over the past couple days because tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow is the day in which the EU is supposed to start sending the asylum seekers who arrive in Greece back to Turkey. And there's been some violence in Greece this weekend leading up to that. And I think there's going to be violence between Christians and Muslims, between Middle Easterners and Europeans, and also between Muslims and Middle Easterners and Middle Easterners. And my biggest concern is the economy. I believe that if the economy is not strong, and if there are areas that are rife with unemployment...
Josh, tell us again, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but tell us again, what is your solution? Because you have a very smart solution.
Oh, it's too late in the podcast to get into this, but
don't
very,
get into it, just say it
very,
because it's so obvious.
Very generally speaking, I believe Europe needs to cut off the welfare.
Me too. I agree. How many more minutes of the podcast do we have?
Well, we've already been going for almost 50 minutes.
So is it time to wrap it up?
I think it's time to wrap it up. But on that point, I'll say by awarding generous welfare benefits and government-funded housing, taxpayer-funded housing, and taxpayer-funded monthly stipends and all kinds of stuff, you are encouraging people to come if they don't want to work, or to come and not work. And I think that's a huge problem. And I think the welfare state is
that is why they're coming.
I think the welfare state is at the core of the refugee crisis in Europe.
That's why they want to go to all those rich countries, those rich socialist countries, because they know that they will get free handouts. And Merkel made it clear to them that they were welcome in Germany. That's how it started. It's craziness. And by the way, let me mention one more thing. I saw a report, or I don't remember if I watched a video or whatever, but apparently 2 of the guys who were involved in the Brussels attack had worked at the airport. And apparently, according to some sources, when there was the Paris attack, before the Brussels attack, the Muslim employees at the Brussels airport were cheering. So, I mean, and you said that somehow the people in the Paris attack came through the same route from Idomeni
Yeah,
through the
they had
Balkans.
gone to Syria and then they were coming back. And they came back embedded with the refugees.
Well,
Some of them.
so, I mean, welcome to the new Europe.
It's going to be exciting.
May you live in interesting times.
We do live in interesting times.
Cheers to that, Josh.
Na zdrave, that means to health.
Na zdrave. I всичко най-хубаво. All the best.
Inatep.
And to you.
Alright, we're signing off with a little bit of Bulgarian. This has been another edition of the FreeManCast. I'm glad to have Brent Sanders back on with me. I am Josh Friedman, and I am saying goodbye.
Goodbye.